Hello world, Bettina Carey here, broadcasting from foggy Seattle today, I hate to say. I'm here with Tammy Stamps, and she's the author, musician, motivational speaker, and martial arts expert that I'm going to be interviewing today. Tammy and I met nearly just this year, and it was on social media. And how we found each other is not what I'm here to talk to you about today. I'm actually here to talk to you about why we are kindred spirits. It's this that we came to talk to you about, and that is that we are both survivors of abuse. As you may already have read, domestic violence and sexual assaults and violence against children are all up due to the COVID effect. But what we're here to talk to you about is the silver lining in the cloud on this topic, in the hopes that we might be able to inspire women in all walks of life. But first of all, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Tammy a little bit more formally. For those of you who know me, and you know that I'm all about and passionate about empowering women to succeed, and Tammy is as well. We have this in common. As an abuse survivor, Tammy's passion is about empowering others to overcome life's challenges, to succeed at everything that they undertake, and to see the best in themselves. And by telling her story, Tammy hopes to inspire others to stand and use their voice to begin their journey of healing. Her book, Our Time, A True Story of Surviving Long-Term Abuse and a Journey to Becoming Whole, is a memoir of her long-term abuse and a life changed forever. Tammy's inspiring story helps people transition from victims to survivors. She does this by sharing these truths. You own your story. Others may believe you're sharing your story is to hurt someone. Your suffering is not who you are. You can overcome your past. You can create the future you want, no matter what you've been through. You didn't deserve it. First of all, thank you for coming on the show to talk to about this important topic, and welcome, Tammy, to It's a Small World After All, and we're all in this together.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much for having me. It's just a great honor to be here, to have an opportunity to perhaps empower others and help them along their journey.
Yes, wonderful. Well, what I'd like to have you do to begin with is just to tell us a little bit about your journey, and then I have some more questions for you. So okay. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, and so that people can get to know you better.
Excellent. Well, I'm Tammy Stamps, and I am a survivor of 43 years of abuse, sexual and emotional abuse from my father. And I left that abuse when I was 43, as many adult years later. And I am also, on the other flip of the coin, I am a business owner. I am a U.S. team alternate for Taekwondo 4 times. And I have written a couple of books, and I teach self-defense. I do all kinds of things that people would perceive as very successful. But my journey is that twofold, where the outside that is seen is different from the inside that is felt. And so my journey was long, it was hard, and it continues through every day, every minute of every day, even since I left. So I'm wanting to share a little bit about that journey with everyone.
Well, I guess then that inspires me to ask the very first question, which is, how the heck could you be so successful after 43 years of abuse? And that just kind of defies all logic, right? Well, it is something I've noticed in women that become survivors, is that they tend to have the truth and the ugly truth, but then they also have really wonderful stories of success that have kind of arisen from that.
Yes. Well, in my belief, when we're trying to, we were going through an abusive situation, sometimes I know I felt very weak. I didn't have any strength. I couldn't stand up to my abuser, but I knew I had strength. I just couldn't use it in that arena. And so when I got into martial arts and different things like that, that was an opportunity for me to find the strength that my self-esteem could be built up upon. And so I think that even though I was successful in martial arts and music and that sort of thing, there was always that lack of confidence. I would get to a certain point and then I would just pretty much give up. So I would always, most of the time, would make it up to the like semifinals of nationals, internationals, and US team level. And then I would just deflate. And I would say, well, you deserve it. I can't do this.
Right.
And I think you develop an outside personality, maybe a second personality, one of whom you want to be and one of whom you don't, the one that you want people to see. And so when you're having to show that, you're having to be strong. And that's, for me, that's how I built my self-esteem. Unfortunately, I built it from the outside in instead of the inside out.
Right. Yeah. Well, oftentimes people refer to this that occurs, which is either checking out or being outside of your body or having a state of disassociation. And it becomes a little bit of a skill. You can actually use it as a skill set so that you can keep yourself out of harm's way. But it also has its downside because you can't be in your body and you have to get your body back in. So what do you do to get yourself back into your body to be able to do whatever mourning, grieving that you need to be doing in order to continue to move on your path? Because this is clearly something that will be with you the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And I will probably jump in here in terms of my own story here as we're talking, just so that people can get the association with this.
Okay.
So.
Well, I think for me, and I still struggle with this today, that I have always believed that it's what I do that is important instead of who I am, because I honestly didn't know who I was. And so I would compartmentalize everything and I would push it down. And I started having health issues even as a little kid, pushing down the pain and the anger and the rage and the hurt, right, all of those things. And so to really get inside, I think I very much so disassociated, was able to cut things off. And that was a survival tool at that point, but it doesn't serve me so well today, years later. But I think my ability to just push it down. And the only thing that would really open that door was anger, right, and rage. But as long as I was being applauded for the things I would do, like, doing martial arts, having my business, cleaning the house, doing things that people appreciated, but they didn't care who I was. And so I really didn't know who I was. So it was kind of hard to get back into that.
Yes, I can totally relate. I remember in my 40s when I finally went to some therapy with a group of both women and men, and some survivors and some abusers in this particular group. I discovered that I was so dissociated that I couldn't get angry. And I had been tapping down the anger from my abuse story for so long. And I wasn't even clued in how much anger and rage there really was. I had survived, basically 3 murder attempts from my first husband. And during the time that we were together, I became pregnant. We went ahead and got married at that time. I was just in high school. I was in the last month of my high school when this occurred. And we were journeying to not Seattle, but Tacoma, Washington. And there was an assault in the vehicle, and it led to the premature birth of my daughter, who subsequently passed away as a result. And I should have been extremely angry and overtly angry, but the layers of just being a victim were so piled on top of me that I really could not own anger and rage at this person. And therefore I stayed. And I stayed about a year after my daughter's death, and then subsequently found my way from my 18, 19 years old self to my 40s before I started to really uncover and unearth the abuse that I had been through. And so I applaud you for all of the work and the effort that you've put forward to clean up a little bit, as it were, our life and your life to get to where you're at today. So you actually asked me to ask you a question that I am a little uncomfortable asking, because I know I hate being asked this question. And it is the question that most people ask in the criminal side of things. They ask not knowing what else to ask about, but I never ask this question myself, but I'm going to ask it because you asked. And that is, so why didn't you leave after 43 years of abuse?
Okay. Yes, I wanted you to ask that question because I know people that have not been in this situation, in an abusive situation, just think, well, just leave. You can just leave. It's
Right.
no big deal.
Why don't you just leave?
Absolutely. And I think, I taught self-defense to domestic violence victims for quite some time. And during that time, I was being victimized by my father. And I would get up in front of them and I would tell them, I don't stand in front of you pretending to know what you're going through. I don't know. And I was lying all the time because I was going through it myself. And so, but the reason I say that is because even in my mind, even I was being abused, I was thinking to myself, why don't they just leave? I don't get it. And yet I was staying. And so just like your story, I wasn't very good earlier about telling a little bit about my story. And so this is where this kind of falls into place. As a little baby, I was being abused by my father. He had a daughter from a previous marriage that he was not allowed to see after age 2 because he was sexually inappropriate with her. And so in my household, it was myself, and then I had a sister that was my mother's daughter from a previous marriage. She was being abused as well, but neither one of us knew about it. And I was the youngest, and so my father took me under his wing, as they say, and started molding me as a little kid, controlling me. And, they have covert language that they use. It can be language, it can be a look. My dad was the king of looks. And the minute he looked at me when no one else could see it, I knew exactly what those looks meant. The things he would say. My mother would be going to the grocery store and I would want to go with her so badly because I knew when she left what was going to happen. But my father would say, well, Tammy needs to stay home and help me with the project. I knew exactly what he meant, and the control and the fear. Somebody who abuses you doesn't just abuse you all the time. Maybe they do. In my case, they didn't. It was my father, and I loved him in one sense of the word and hated him in the other. So it's very confusing as a little kid, but it would be the carrot and the stick. They'd buy you something, they'd give you something, and then they'd abuse you 3 times a week. Yeah. So
it's a little bit of a love-hate relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Kids naturally love their parents. They long to have a parent's attention and the parent's love. And when it's this confused and mixed up, it can be very, very triggering.
It can. Yeah, especially my mother was someone who was just, cut it all off in denial and never saw it. It was a secret. And, she claimed she didn't know, but she did know. But growing up, my older sister would go on a date and she'd come home and my father would give me the look. And at night at 2 a.m, my door would fly open, the light would come on and he'd berate me and question me about her. And he'd say, if you know something, you don't tell me about it, it's gonna, you're gonna pay for that. But I mean, just the constant, the control. Our phone calls were recorded. That was before cell phones, but our phone calls were recorded. We had sleep deprivation where he'd come and he would be by my bed at night and I would have school the next day and I'd be so tired and I'd start to fall asleep and he would say, you're weak, wake up. But he would have taken the day off the next day. And it's the control and always surrounding yourself, him being there all the time. I would have something I needed to do. And of course I would have to ask his permission even at age 43. And he would say, okay, call me when you get there. And then I would go to the gym. Well, call me when you get there and call me when you get back. We would have to call about every 2 hours. It was constant control. And like you said, Bettina, the love-hate relationship. And so there was fear. If you ever tell anyone, I'm going to kill you. And as a little kid, you're molded to that.
Yeah.
and has never left her side, and would not allow us to do much at all outside the home because he didn't want us to go out and say anything. So those are some of the reasons I didn't leave. I was scared. It was fear. Yeah. It was fear, and those were my parents. I wasn't getting any support from either one of them. My mother would come home knowing I always thought that I could control the looks on my face because no one noticed them. So after the abuse, my mother would come home and she knew that something was wrong, and she'd say, "Are you okay?" And yeah, I'm fine. And she'd take that, and that's all she wanted to hear.
And she never wanted to question.
Not at all. And so you grow up in that. That becomes your life. And that's what you expect. And no one else is noticing.
Yeah.
I mean,
and there's probably a story to be told about your mother that we might not know right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a huge part of the story, and we don't have time for that today, but it's in the book. But I think people that aren't in this situation cannot understand the daily, the minutes, the hours that you're taking, that you're getting looks, the control, the suffocating, the guilt trips. If you don't do this, and we don't have anything. I don't have anything to do with you if you don't do this.
Yeah.
And it's just all the threats and the fear. And so that was...
Yeah, that Stockholm syndrome that was identified years ago is what I relate to the most, because it literally is, you can't choose your own look. You can't have your own clothes. You can't cut your own hair any way you want.
No.
And you can't be on your own time, sneaking out to go to church, sneaking out to have friendships, sneaking out all around the situation, just trying to survive.
Absolutely.
So interestingly enough, you were sharing with me that your father, your abuser, was the one who encouraged you to get into martial arts. So how has martial arts transformed you from a victim into a survivor?
Well, I think that, the martial arts, when I got into it, I had always lacked confidence in all the sports that I played, obviously. And so my father said, well, I think martial arts would be good for you. I think it's an individual sport and it would build your confidence. So he was very loving and very abusive at the same thing. So I checked it out and I didn't like it. And then I tried a different academy and I got into it. And I think the thing that inspired me and empowered me about it was one area of my life that turned into a positive way that I could get out my rage and my anger in a positive way, because it's very aggressive sport. And so it gave me a voice when I didn't have one. It gave me self-esteem from the outside, where if I was really good, people looked up to me and admired me when I couldn't really look at myself without shame and guilt and all of those things. So it really made a difference in my life. It built my confidence, but even in martial arts, I lacked confidence at a certain level. I didn't believe in myself.
So you mentioned that there were 4 things that saved your life. Can you pinpoint what those were for us?
Sure. The first one is martial arts, because it gave me a voice and it gave me a positive outlet for my anger and rage and my abilities as well. Music was one of the biggest ways that saved my life, because I remember going into my
beautiful voice, by the way.
Pardon me?
You have a beautiful voice, by the way.
Thank you, Bettina. But my favorite singer was, and still is, Celine Dion. And so when I was growing up, I would put headphones on and I would crank her music up. And she was one of the very few artists that her voice, I could feel it from my toes to my head. And I could feel, before that, I couldn't feel anything. And I could feel something. I could feel love. I could feel those things. And I could feel her voice coming out of me. I would lip sing with that. But music, then I started writing it. And it was a kind of a subtle way that I could have a voice, tell a story, but no one on the outside knew the story was about me and my life. So it was kind of a start to a voice that people could understand some things, but they didn't know it was about me. Thirdly was my dog. That was the only thing in my life that ever taught me what love was and how to be loved and how to love. Seriously, it was the only thing in my life. until I was 43 years old, that she was a protector. She taught me so many lessons. And the fourth thing that saved my life, this is going to be weird, but was my shirt over my face. Whenever I was being abused, I would put a shirt over my face. I would disassociate so I didn't have to see what was going on. Oh, wow. And, you know, when you see something, you can't unsee it. And so right. For me, that was something that helped me survive.
Yeah, yeah. I know when I go into the doctor's office now, if there's any sort of breast exam or anything like that, I definitely have to close my eyes. I can't.
Yes.
Can't do it.
Yes.
So what advice can you offer women who are right now in this situation at home with their abuser? Maybe their children are being abused, you know, or mothers who are witnessing or suspect that their husbands, or in some cases females too abuse, are abusing a child and grooming them. What can you offer in the way of advice?
Well, I think, you know, first of all, I'm sorry if you are going through that, but you can get past it. As a child, it's harder, obviously. You know, sometimes they take you out of your home, put you in a worse home, and you come back. I mean, it's just a horrible thing. But silence, with silence, if you're silent, you remain a victim and you empower the person, the abuser. Don't want to do that. You have to use your voice somehow. You have to realize, I teach self-defense, and seeing the spirit that is within all of us has brought out my spirit. But I think that you have to use your voice. You have to know that when I taught domestic violence victims, several of them would stay in a situation, you know, when they were being abused. The minute their kids started being abused, they would leave. But I just have a question about that. What does that tell you about your self-worth? You need to change that. You need to believe in yourself, that you are worth standing up for. And realizing that your power, you didn't give your power away. It was stolen, but you can get it back. And when you get it back, it will be in piecemeal. But the day that you can look in the mirror, and I did this just several months ago, I looked in the mirror and I was getting ready for a booking, for a book engagement. And I saw myself in the mirror. I was putting my makeup on, and all of a sudden I said to myself in my mind, I am so proud of you. You know, you have a pulse. You have all of these things. You have survived. And when I did, tears started coming down my face, because at that moment, for the first time in my life, I started to love me and realize it wasn't my fault. But you know, can I tell a quick story about how I got out of it?
Totally. Yeah.
Because I didn't love myself. You know, I never cut or anything like that, drank, drugs, but I had a gun and I put it to my head several times. But we were not allowed as kids growing up to show anything, to talk to anybody, to show anything. Our reputation was the most important thing as a family. And so being a head of a martial arts academy, people think, you know, you're an authority figure and you've got it together. And I remember I had an event at my academy where it was kind of a fun night for the students and myself, and a talent night. And so that night I was going to sing, you know, play my guitar and sing music and that sort of thing for my students. So I had a makeshift stage and I was on that. And in front of me were my students. And behind me was one chair. It was my father. And so during my performance, I noticed a friend of mine kept glancing at my father, and then would glance at me, and it was like, you know, I'm singing, so I see this is weird, but I don't know what's happening. The next day I went into my academy, and this friend of mine came in. I was by myself, and she said, Tammy, someone's hurt you. I said, no, they haven't. I'm fine. And I just hoped she'd go away, because I didn't want anyone to find out. I was 43. Right. It was a secret. No one knew anything about it. And so the next day she came back in and she said, Tammy, I know who it was that's hurting you. And I said, who? Oh, wow. And I said, my heart. And she said, your father. And within 1 week, I was gone. It took some other female, some other person that cared enough to look into my eyes to
Gives
see.
me goosebumps.
It was,
Mhm.
it was life, obviously life changing. I was suicidal that whole week. It was horrible. But within a
Yeah.
week, she empowered me to leave. And that's when we're talking about leaving. People have to care enough to look in your eyes and see what's going on and help
Yeah.
you. You
Yeah.
can't help yourself.
Right. As long as you think that it's a covered up situation, it's much harder to leave because you're invested in keeping the secret.
Yes.
And once it's out, then you realize that it doesn't have to be a secret. For me, it came about when I was sneaking out to go to church, and I met a youth pastor this was in the Catholic Church, and I started counseling with him, and one person knew. My mom kind of had an inkling, and my father probably too, but we didn't discuss it. And they were living in Colorado, and I was now in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to an event while he was a soldier in the military, and while he was doing some duty in the evening, and I just never went back. I literally left with the clothes on my back, not intending to leave. But the night before that had happened, and for everybody's, it's going to be a little bit different, but I had this really vivid dream that I was going to end up in prison for having killed him. I was 100% convinced that it was just a matter of time that I would find a reaction in me. I couldn't react to him while he was abusing me, but there was a part of me that must have been knowing inside. And when I woke up the next morning, I already had a seed planted in my head that if I don't get out of here, it's not going to end well. And to this very day, I would never own a weapon. I would never try to have anything that I could use on someone because I don't know what would trigger me.
Right.
And then I would use violence as a solution.
Absolutely.
So I don't keep any weapons. But I left, and I didn't look back, but he attempted many, many, many times to stalk me, to find me. He found me several times, and there was always abuse involved. And the last time that he found me, he literally took me by the throat, and he took me outside and attempted to strangle me. And so even after I got out, he still would attempt to end my life, correct? So basically, when you're in an abusive situation, it can escalate. Someone can literally be killed or kill, not meaning to, just to defend themselves, because this just messes with your head so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm too a survivor. I've thrived, having left there and had better relationships, and literally turned my life around. But at the time, it was really pretty horrific. And people who know me now, they're going to be really shocked to hear that this was a part of my life ever, because that just isn't part of who they know. I don't necessarily talk about this very often because it just doesn't come up in conversation. But for any woman who's known me like you, who has the conversation of domestic violence has come up, I am happy to disclose, I'm happy to talk about this, because in discussing this out loud, they can see, wow, she's successful over here. Maybe I have that same opportunity to come out of what my circumstances are. So I philosophically believe we are not our circumstances. I've even gotten to the point where I look back at that abuse and I realize that not that it had a reason or a purpose, but that I'm going to take what happened to me and I'm going to turn it into a purpose. I'm going to empower women in their lives. I'm going to help women get out. And there's several women in my life who know that I was there and got them out of their circumstances. So if there's a woman out there listening and you need help, you need to make a choice, you need to have an aha moment, you need to hear a message, a calling for you to take your life from a victim status to a thriving status, you only need to call us. So how can people get a hold of you, Tammy? And then I'll let them know a little bit about the summit that's coming up.
Okay, excellent. Well, you can go to my website. It's www.tammystamps.com. You're welcome to email me, and I will email you right back at stampstammy@aol.com, and that's Tammy with a Y. Those are the best ways to get in touch with me, and I will help any way that I can.
Absolutely. And to reach me, it's just askbettina@gmail.com and 206-349-4297. So Tammy is going to be one of our presenters at the Women's Empowerment Summit, which is moving confident women forward on June 10th. It's an all-day virtual telethon, basically. And we're going to be starting at 8:30 a.m. in the morning. We're going to go all the way through 8:30 p.m. in the evening with some breaks, some experiences through our app where you can actually go in and have experiences with music, with our exhibitors, our sponsors. There's going to be an archive of information available for anyone who wants to look into our library of resources. And we'll have our full programming complete by June 1st, so you'll be able to tap in. It's only $17 to attend. Go to women'sempowermentmarketplace.com to register. And I look forward to seeing you at the summit. Thank you so much, Tammy, for joining me today on It's a Small World After All, and we're all in this together. Let's help women to thrive and not just survive.
Let's do it. Thank you so much for having me, Bettina.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
See you.